And if you hire somebody and they start creating more work for you than taking it off your plate, you probably haven't made a great hire. Then once you sign that contract, that first 2 weeks with them is just the most crucial period, right? And it's if you do have that good hire and you have a good training plan in place for them, and you're going to be able to get them up to speed, they're super dialed in. Within 2 weeks, if you've done a really good job, you should have someone that's adding significant value to your business within 2 weeks. When your leads are low and your sales are slow, who you gonna call? Brushbuster. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Brushbusters. My name is Jesse. I'm one of the coaches here at Painter Growth, and we have Rich, another one of our awesome coaches. Rich just joined us. He just exited his exterior cleaning company, which is really cool. So a ton of experience. We're going to be answering a number of letters today that you guys have submitted. So you ready to rock and roll, Rich?
Ready to go.
All right, let's have some fun. I'll read out the first one here, and then let's get going. So this is from Jake. Jake says, "Dear Brushbusters, I've been trying to hire more team members to keep up with demand, but it's been a nightmare. I've had multiple no-shows for interviews and hires that don't last a week. I need help finding reliable workers who want to stay in my company. What strategies do you use for hiring and keeping good people?" All right, that's a pretty loaded question. Do you wanna start, Rich?
Yeah, I can. We dealt with this a lot in my last company the first year or two as we were getting established and getting organized. And I found one of the best things to improve, like what we're eliminating no-shows in the interviewing process, is to really make sure that you have a organized process to move people through the funnel. So specifically, like when you get someone that applies, if you have jobs posted on Indeed or other online resources, just like we talked about speed to lead with a client, one, make sure that you reach out to that applicant ASAP, like ideally same business day. So you have a process in place and you're organized, and someone's monitoring the applications literally down to that level, so that when you get a good candidate apply, you're reaching out to them within a couple hours. So I'd say that's step one. Step two, having a good template of, for example, your initial phone screen. You're asking every single person the same questions, the same way, and you're writing down that information in a file, so you keep everything organized for all your phone screens for that hiring season. Stage three, ideally in that phone screen, if they seem like a good candidate, and you'll know once you get experience interviewing, phone screening, etc., and you're looking for a certain type of person, schedule the interview when you have them on the phone. If you're doing that phone screen and they seem like a good candidate, they meet your baseline qualifications, and you want to move them forward to an interview, just do it right then and there, so that you're eliminating having to contact them again and reply. Schedule the interview, make sure they're very clear on where it is, when it is. If you're doing Zoom, which I know a lot of people are moving towards even for like contracting businesses, that's totally fine. Make sure that they know how to use it, they know the time, that they've got the email, and make sure that the interview is within a couple days of the phone screen. So really what that shows is like, have a plan in place, be organized, reach out to them immediately, move them through the process fast. And by doing that, candidates will go, wow, okay, this potential employer is like, they'll be able to tell, like, wow, this person's organized.
Yeah. I love everything that you're saying there. And I think that, the way Jake's phrasing this too, he's like, to try to keep up with demand. So shout out to Jake for having a ton of demand and trying to do this. But when you get into that place, I think, just to build on what you're saying, Rich, is it's easy to scramble and just try to do things like really, really quickly. And then you miss these steps that we're talking about. And then when you miss these steps, you end up with things like, people not showing up, or you hire them on and they're just terrible hires and they don't last a week. And it ends up creating more work for you in the long run. Right. And so, like Rich said, it starts with that process. And, just so that everyone kind of has that full look of the funnel and the process, it starts with who is that ideal painter or person that you're trying to hire, right? What are the characteristics of them? What do they look like? Then making a job posting that actually is going to attract that type of person, right? And then when you make that job posting, something that I always do is put a Google form where it kind of goes through the non-negotiables, like the deal breakers for me, right? So what are the deal breakers for hiring a new painter? Do they have a driver's license? Can they get to site, on time every single day? Are they, do they live in the area? Do they have a work permit for, where they work? Those deal breakers that, and if people don't take that step of filling in that form, then they're probably not going to show up, or they're going to not be a good hire anyway. So that kind of weeds out a lot of people. And then from there, doing the things like you said, having that really good call for those people that show up so that you can set up those interviews. And then when you do make that hire, make it a legit process where after you make that hire, you sit down with them and you get them to sign off on a contract. You understand the deliverables. You guys know what is expected of you as the employer, and what's expected of them as, the painter and the employee. And then to actually keep them and get them past that. If they're not a good hire in the first place, you probably don't want to keep them past that first week. We always had a phrase in our company. I'm not sure if you guys had it, but it was hire fast, but fire fast as well. Right. So, make those hires, go with your gut, and, but then also be okay with letting them go. And if you hire somebody and they start creating more work for you than taking it off your plate, you probably haven't made a great hire. Then once you sign that contract, that first 2 weeks with them is just the most crucial period. Right. And it's, if you do have that good hire and you have a good training plan in place for them, and you're going to be able to get them up to speed, they're super dialed in within 2 weeks. If you've done a really good job, you should have someone that's adding significant value to your business within 2 weeks. So this doesn't have to be a 2 or 3 month process to get a new, rock star to handle that. You could have this done in really like 2 to 3 weeks, and you have another A player on your team, and really looking for those A players. Rich, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say just in terms of what you said of establishing your ideal candidate, I think that's like a really good first step before you post that ad. Just so that in the back of your mind, when you're speaking to a candidate, you're subconsciously going through, is this person checking these boxes? Whether you're asking them specific questions related to that profile. So for example, it could be like something that we established is like, we're looking for individuals that are between like 21 and 29 years old. They played team sports at one point in their life. Reason for that, they can work well with others, and they have some level of physical activity, because working on a job site does require some level of physical capability. 21 to 29 years old, team sports. And then ideally we would look for people too that had some skin in the game, meaning like they lived on their own, they had bills. This is like getting very particular, but just trying to set that profile, whatever you want it to be for your business, where it's like, in our case, we would want people that were responsible. So like they had skin in the game. They wanted to show up to work. They were driven to move forward and succeed. So I think, like, to your point, that's a great first step. And then again, just keeping organized, moving people through the process fast, making sure that you, as the owner, if you're going to be the one hiring, that you've set aside time in your calendar with your time blocking that we talk about so much. So like make sure that you've dedicated the time for that week to do that hiring blitz so that it gets done.
Yeah, I love that. And when you are in that rush, or you have a demand and you're looking to add them quickly, it becomes even more important to follow your process and to do this right from the get-go. Because if you don't, it's going to create more work for you in the long run, right? Where you're going to go through that 2 or 3 week period where this person doesn't work out anyways. And guess what? You're going to have to go do it again. And it actually just creates more work for you. So even if you're in that crunch zone where you have that demand, you got to add your capacity. That is really when following your process is even more and more important to save you time in the long run. And doing the time now, putting the time in up front, is going to save you time in the long run, right? Where, I think a lot of people that we see in coach, they make very short-term decisions, right? Where it's like, cool, they need a painter, and so they hire the next guy that comes in, versus following every step, the single step of the process, and knowing how much time that's going to save on the back end. So, all right, I think we nailed that one pretty good. You ready to keep going?
Let's do it.
All right. Do you want to read the next one, or do you want me to?
Sure. Yeah. So the next one is pricing for profit. Hey, Brushbusters, I've been working hard to grow my business, but I'm not seeing the profits I expected. I worry my prices are too low, but I don't want to scare off clients by raising them. How do I figure out the right pricing strategy to stay competitive, but also make money? That's from Carlos in Texas.
All right. That's a great question. I think pricing overall is, anytime I look at any company, pricing is like the first place I actually look at for like the lowest hanging fruit on how to make more money in your business, right? If you know how to price properly and then price accordingly to the value that you can offer, it's like it can be immediately added to your bottom line, right? And so first thing I always say is like, do you have a estimation method that you've been following to make sure that you are earning at least 45% gross margin on the jobs, right? So if you book a $10,000 job after paying out all of your labor expenses, paint and soft supplies, are you making at least $4,500? And if you're not there right now, it's really hard to cover all the other overhead that is required in a painting company to actually run a overall profitable company if you're not hitting those margins. And so take a look right now. It's like where are you at? And a really easy one is to just look at your paint costs, your paint and materials costs, and if they're roughly 10% of what your jobs are, your pricing's reasonably on par with industry standards, right? Now, when you're actually estimating it, so that's first and foremost, get a system in place where you're actually making the money, and then looking at your demand and your schedule, right? So Carlos, I don't know if how far you are booked out. The other thing is just being confident in the value that you're providing for the clients and making sure that it's actually worth it for you to take on that job, right? Is it actually worth it for you to take on 4, 5, 6 days of your life or your crew's life to make the money that you're going to make? But also knowing where you're priced in the market, right? If they went and got, I know in our company, it's if they went and got 10 estimates, I know that there'd be 5 lower and 5 higher. But for us, we want to be like, in the middle, maybe a little bit, above the middle, but we're always going to provide, I would say, a 13 out of 10 experience. And then it's once you have that pricing that that, where do you want to play? And people don't always just value low budget jobs, right? So it's understanding the customer and what they need or what their needs are as well. All of our clientele that we target, they never choose the lowest guy, right? They choose it. Generally, they get 3 quotes. They choose the guy in the middle, right? That's why I'd like to be in the middle, but they know where they're going to get really good value from that. So, yeah, Rich, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, you touched on some good things there. I would say from Carlos's question, it's not 100% clear, but I would say this really emphasizes the importance of just knowing your numbers. Because if you're going off of feel, I'm not saying that Carlos is, but in general, if you're sort of, I think I'm kind of high, it's like you should know if you are, yes or no. So I'd say this is where it's really key to like have a system to track your job costing. How much are you making on every single job? What's your labor margin on every single job? And tracking that as a starting point. Knowing what your closing ratio is, tracking that so that, then you'll have some data to go, well, hey, I'm closing at, let's just say, for example, 20%. Well, then maybe we can say, hey, maybe your pricing is too high. Or, hey, what's your sales process? Because maybe there's some opportunities to improve, like your setup calls, closing on the spot, et cetera, et cetera. So really, I just want to emphasize by really tracking some key metrics in your business, you'll then be able to make a more educated guess, especially with a coach, in terms of knowing where to make adjustments. The second thing I would say is if you do know your numbers, but then you're concerned that your prices are too low, but you want to raise them. So Carlos says here, I don't want to scare off my clients. So I'd say this is where it really comes to like a mindset thing and a confidence thing. If your employees are well trained, you do good work, you're getting good feedback, you're busy, having that confidence to raise your prices, like whatever it is, $5 an hour. So if you're at 80 going to 85 or jumping to 90, I'd say that really comes with a confidence thing. If you're running a good business, you're getting good feedback from clients, you're busy, you're booked out 4 to 6 weeks, I would say just do it. Like if you're at an $80 an hour charge rate per painter, bump it up to 85, bump it up to 90, go up $10 an hour. And be confident, like focus on just delivering that value and getting really good with your sales process and being able to communicate to clients, hey, this is why we're on the upper third of pricing. With my last cleaning company, I mean, we were on average 50 to 100% more expensive than any other competitor. And our trucks were clean. We targeted high value, like high-end residential, professional service, great communication, very professional staff, and we delivered high quality work. So that's what we charged. And it was just like, not everyone's going to book. That's totally fine. we're in that 40 to 50% closing ratio, being literally 50% to 100%. So like double a lot of our competitors, and we're still looking at work. It's like, then you develop that reputation, deliver the results that you say you will, and charge for it. Make some money. Prices have gone up a lot in the economy the last couple of years. So I mean, you going up 10%, people should almost expect that.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying there too. Is like you can start testing it out with your estimates, right? You know, if you're doing 10 estimates in a week, like experiment and play around with your pricing a little bit and see what lands. And then again, like Rich is saying, it does come back a lot to your sales process, where if you know how to properly add value, by the time you present your pricing for the job, if you've done your job right leading up to that point, they should never be shocked by what the price is. And if they are, it's actually a sales issue. It's not really an estimation issue. And you just need to work on your sales process to get that dialed in. But yeah, play around with it, experiment it with it, Carlos. Don't be afraid if you price a job and you think it's high and then you don't land it. That's okay, right? And you can also go back and offer that client a discount and see if they'll book in that way, right? Like play around with it, have some fun with your pricing, and please do make sure you're making over 45% on your jobs, because that's a really, really important number to make sure you can run a long-term sustainable business. Because ultimately, over time, if you're not in those margins, or if you're seeing competitors that are lowballing people and doing that, over time, those people are going to get weeded out and kicked out of the market because they just don't have enough money to support the business long term. So don't be afraid of that either. All right, let's keep moving. Okay, guys, Coach Rich having a few technical difficulties, but I'm going to continue on this episode and answer a few more letters from you guys here. All right, so the next one's about battling high turnover. This is from Mike from British Columbia. So, hi, coaches. My team is constantly changing because people keep quitting. It's stressful and it's costing me a lot of time and money to train new hires who don't stick around. How can I improve my work environment to reduce turnover and keep my best people? Thanks in advance. And again, that's Mike from BC. Okay, so similarly related to that first question that we had today, the first part of this is making sure that you actually have the right people that are going to stick around, right? And so that recruiting process and making sure that you're finding the right person for those right seats in play, in place of your business. So starting off with the right people. Now because we've already talked a lot about that on this episode of Brushbusters, we're going to go into the second part, which is let's assume that you have good people and you want to keep them around. So going into what's Mike saying about his work environment. So now anytime there's struggle, the first question that I always like to ask when I look at anybody in the business, is it a skill issue or is it motivation? So if it's a skill issue, then we can really work on that, right? We can work on what are the skills that they're having issues with and start going to work on that. The other one is do they have the skill or they're just not motivated, and why are they not motivated? Okay, so the first step in identifying the problem with your painters, is it a motivation or is it a skill issue? And then the solutions to both of those are a little bit different. So you have to figure out, are they not motivated by their compensation structure? Now, the first thing you got to do is make sure that people are compensated fairly. Right? I don't say compensated highly, but fairly. And do people see that as being fair? Because if they don't see their compensation as being fairly, it's going to be really hard for them to be intrinsically motivated. But once they get past that fair compensation, then it's going to be these other things that are beyond money that are really motivating to them. And so similar that we do in the sales process, when we get really clear on a customer and we ask them, what's really important to you when hiring people? What would be a 13 out of 10 experience? Whatever other experiences have you had with painting contractors, good experiences, bad experiences, to understand what's really important to them. And you do the same thing when you're have your team on, right? You could have a binder and have profiles for everybody on your team. And after, they have that fair compensation, you understand what is really important to them in a work environment. Is it the communication? Is it the flexibility? Is it, working outside? Is it working with good people? So what is important to them, and you having some sort of like binder or like painter profile on them is going to help you be a really, really good leader for those people. And you're going to be able to lead them in accordance to what their needs are. So that's something that I started doing back in 2016 with all my painters. Was I had a binder and I had 17 painters at that point, and I had a profile for each one of them, and detailed questions all the way from like their birthday to if they were married, what their spouse's name was, if they had children, what their favorite food was, what their favorite on-site drink was, if it was like a coffee or a Gatorade or something like that. And I had all these notes for every painter. And so I'd show up to sites and meetings and have their specific, favorite drink, for example, and then ask how their wife by name is doing, or their husband. And those little things go so far on like the motivation side of things and helping people know that you're there as a leader to serve and help them in their mission. It's not just about them painting and you paying them and them making, you money for the company, but how do you help them have the role that they're at in your company be next stepping stone to whatever they're doing in their life. And if you can come at it from that mindset, people are going to want to stick around with you for a really, really long time. So that's on the motivation side and making sure they're incentivized properly, right? And then beyond that, what is really important to them? And then if it's a skill issue, so what is the issue, right? Are they having an issue with, rolling or cutting or spraying or masking or working with ladders? And then having a training plan in place to help them overcome those skills. Now, what I would say is to keep them on, and going back to Mike's question here, is that he's spending a lot of time training new hires and sticking around. Again, you got to go to the root issue, like why are they leaving? And are you asking the people that are leaving, why are they leaving? And so getting clarity on that so you can improve. Is it the way you're training them? Is it the culture of your company? Is it the way you're paying them? So getting to that root issue. And then those first 2 weeks will be the most crucial, right? I set the expectation really well in the interview that, the first 2 weeks of doing anything, particularly, starting a labor job, if they haven't, especially if they haven't done it before, it kind of sucks, right? And so I just set the expectation that the first 2 weeks is going to suck. And once I set that expectation that it's going to suck, and then they show up and we actually make it fun and enjoyable and make sure that they're really successful in the first 2 weeks, then they're like, oh, this is way better than I could have ever imagined. So I try to set that expectation very low. And then if they still want to do the job when I say that, and they have more understanding that, yeah, the first 2 weeks, it's going to be a little rough, it's going to be new, and then it's not nearly as bad as they think. But the worst thing you could do is sell the position as this is going to be the best thing of your life. And then they show up in the first 2 weeks. It's, it's uncomfortable. They're trying, they're learning potentially a new skill or the way you guys like to do it. And it's not that fun for them. So try to set your expectations a little bit lower, especially in those first 2 weeks, and then try to go above and beyond, get them a lot of wins and get them embedded into your team, into your culture in those first 2 weeks. Then after that, what I would say is if you can get through those first couple of weeks, Mike, one thing that I did is that we always do a one-on-one meeting with every, at least internal painter. I know I wouldn't say if you're running subcontractors that you need to do a one-on-one meeting with them every single week, but all my internal employees, again, back when I had a ton of internal people, I had 17 internal painters at one point, and my Mondays and Tuesdays would just be one-on-one meetings with every one of my painters. I would go to site, go off to the side. Again, I would bring their favorite drink or whatever, and we have a 20 to 30-minute meeting, and I'd run it through simple structure. What were your top wins last week? What went really well? What are areas can be improved? And then actually review their projected paycheck coming up at the end of the week and make sure that they're making the money that they want to make based on the piece rate system that we had in place. So I take that 20 to 30 minutes and I didn't do that in 2015 and I started implementing that in 2016, and that one thing alone completely changed my production of my internal team. And I had tremendous turnover. I think I turned over like 15 painters in 2015. And the only time we turned over painters in 2016 is when we decided to let them go. So we didn't actually have anybody leave on their accord that year. That's how much of a difference these things made in my own experience. All right, so hopefully that helps, Mike, and keep at it too. And I would say always keep recruiting. Like no matter what position that you're in, always keep recruiting, and you'll keep finding better and better people. All right, let's answer one more question here. This is this is from Sean from Alabama. All right, so it's managing cash flows up and downs. Dear coaches, I'm getting more jobs, but cash flow isn't steady. One week I'm flush, and the next week I'm barely scraping by. It's hard to plan for growth. How can I scale the ups and downs of cash flow, especially when scaling up? Thanks. Again, that's from Sean from Alabama. All right, cash flow financials, one of my favorite topics. So especially when running a painting company, it's super important to to understand cash flow, right? I think a lot of people run their businesses just based on what money they see in their bank account, which doesn't really tell the full story at all, right? Because you might have deposits that you take, and then you have a bunch of what's called payables and the money that you owe people, and then receivables that are coming in. Receivables are what people owe you. But understanding that full picture, Sean, is really the first important piece. So one super simple thing that you can do is just write down the cash in your account, then write down all the receivables that you know are coming in. Okay, anybody that owes you money, and get a full picture of what it looks like on paper, and then write out in the next column all your payables. Okay, so you owe the paint store this much, you owe a credit card of this amount, payroll's coming up, you owe the subcontractor this amount of money, and get a really clear picture of where, when you pay out your payables and you have your receivables come in, where your cash flow is going to be. Then you actually want to look at the dates of those as well. And on your receivables, have it projected when it's coming in, and then payables projected when it's coming out. And you want to see if you can close the gap on when you receive those receivables sooner, and see if there's any opportunity to delay the payables out a little bit further, right? Do you have to pay that credit card right now? Or can you delay that, 4, 5, 6 days? Can you extend a little bit more in your line of credit at the paint store? Pay those a little bit later. And then can you close jobs sooner? So looking at your receivables, can you move that close date up a date, right? Can your guys stay a little later and get that job done sooner? And then make sure that you set the expectation with your customer that as soon as you guys complete the job, you do that final walk around. That's also when final payment is due, right? Too often I see this a lot, that people will do the final walk around and close out a job, and then they'll send an invoice and they don't get paid for 1, 2, or 3 weeks. And that really, really hurts your cash flow, especially as you're trying to scale up. So one part of the process that we always have is that every time that we're closing a job, we do the final walk around with the customer. We do any touch-ups right then and there, so our crews never have to go back. And then we collect final payment as well. And that keeps our receivables much, much tighter time frame of turnaround, and it really helps manage that cash flow. The other thing I would say with cash flow is that if you can separate your bank accounts into a few different accounts. So you could have your operating account, you could have a profit account, a tax account, and then even a deposit account, right? So you put your deposits in the deposit account, so you're not just spending that and using that for a lot of the cash flow. And then you can move money from that operating account into your tax account and into your profit account. And then you run your business just left on what's in the operating account. And so it's a way that if you have those accounts set up, it's very easy to go set up at the bank, that you can move money to a profit account, but it's not yet going to be a taxable event. And so you can play around with that cash flow a little bit. But you want to then build up that operating account to a certain level where you're not stressed about making payroll, right? General rule of thumb, if you're running a $500K business, you should have at least $30,000 of operating capital in your checking account. And then if you're running, so let's say $1 million business, you should have at least 60 or 70,000 in that operating account. So just never let that account get much below that, unless it's for like a day or two to manage payroll. But those are the operating levels that you want. So just going back to Sean's question here. Yeah, so it's really about projecting and planning, looking at your receivables and payables, Sean, and then making sure that you have enough operating capital in your checking account, and separate those different accounts so that the cash is giving you a better picture of what's actually true. And you just never want to be in a position where you feel like you're quote unquote super flush, but then you have all these payables that are going to come out, and then it feels like you're way down. You're not actually moving the needle forward. And at the forefront of all of this is just make sure that you're tracking your financials, right? You got an awesome bookkeeper. You're looking at what a profit and loss statement every month from your bookkeeper, and then tying it in and tracking this, right? Track your numbers, track your not only your core KPIs, but then tracking your financials and getting that dialed in so that you can scale sustainably. All right. I think we're going to wrap up there. So appreciate you guys listening to this episode of Brush Busters. Turned into a little bit of a solo episode on the second part of this, but we appreciate Coach Rich on the first part. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys on the next episode.